Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Framework Podcast. I'm one of your two hosts today, and joined by Toussaint Bailey, who I got to just see you out at Excel very briefly a couple weeks ago, but glad for you to be on the show. I know we were supposed to do this out there, so we have pivoted in the world of pivoting and change, and glad to have you on the show here today.
No, it's a pleasure to be on. There was plenty going on at Excel, so glad we can carve out some dedicated space for the show today.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. And, we're just here with you right now. You're our special guest, and we want to learn more about your life, your story. But tell us real quick, who you are, what you do right now. And if you're not watching, he's got the great brand in, the Uplifting Capital right above your, right shoulder, I think. Yep. But it looks awesome.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. So founder and CEO of a firm called Uplifting Capital. So we do private market impact investing. And so think of that as kind of a direct indexing like values alignment experience with private market investments. Been doing that for the last year dedicated. And before that, I was at a private wealth firm called Enzo Wealth Management. So just an RIA working with high net worth clients focused on fulfillment, CEO there. And that journey sort of led me here in 2020. And we can go into how that transpired plenty on the podcast, but this sort of combines passion and impact and professional experience for me. This has been the culmination of all of those things.
We always like to tie in your money memory to this story here. So talk to us about your first money memory.
Yeah, I was thinking about that coming into the show because I know you always like to tie those in. I think the first money memory that comes up for me is high school, actually. And it was really the first time I wanted something for myself that was outside of my parents' means to buy me. And in this case, it wasn't anything major. It was kind of a different level of school clothes I wanted to wear my junior year of high school. And so I just remember up to that point, spending most of my summers playing basketball or football. And at that point, I took on my first job as a Subway sandwich artist and worked hard enough to save up enough money to buy myself I think some of the Nike and Adidas tracksuits that I wanted to buy myself and some nice kicks and the sort of empowerment and the liberation that I felt buying something that my parents at the time or my mom at the time couldn't buy me is really what kind of sticks out in my mind when you ask me about a money memory.
I like that. You also, we used to ask about food. I don't know if we're going to continue it. And, even the money memory, people are playing now. They know the answer, right? They're looking at it. And, but I like that you described, the Subway food artist too. Did you have a go-to sandwich? You were like, if somebody came in, they're like, make sure you ask for Toussaint to make you that tuna sandwich. It's just better. It's slightly better than everybody else.
Oh, yeah, no, I was off menu. So I went off menu. So I had the chicken breast sandwich, but I would put some marinara on that, a little bacon on that. So it was kind of like a chicken parm, but we didn't have the fried chicken. So yeah, it's my own little creation.
Secret menu.
I did.
That.
Yeah, my special was just to give people double meat if I liked them. I just as a business owner now, I don't know if I love that. But as a high school kid, it was cool.
Yeah, just no longer in the boat of let me just double up that cost on you for because I like you, right? Yeah, you think back about those things, right? Like go to bars or restaurants, and I think some degree is serving people well. It tends to pay off, right? Like really good experience and service. But you think back now, you're like, well, why don't they just give us more free stuff? You're like, because they won't be in business. It's like there's a really good answer.
Truly.
I'm sure Subway has okay profit margins, but probably not 50%, right? So they can't just double everything.
Yeah, I know that now. That is not lost on me now. Then it seemed free.
Yeah, it's fun. So yeah, we'll dive into some stuff too. I'd love to hear about the move into the space you are today, and also maybe tell us a little bit about that alignment of you kind of mentioned like values based or kind of investing or however you want to describe that, and how did you even find that as something to learn about and become passionate about?
Yeah. So for me, for a lot of people, I think 2020 was as introspective as we had been in our lifetimes, right? It was very, very quiet at the beginning of 2020. And then we started to reflect on who we were as a country after George Floyd's life was taken. I was among those people, except I was kind of at work during this experience, right? So I was in my office when I witnessed that, and I was very much kind of entrenched in work as I was experiencing that, and so for me, it was trying to show up at work and hold all this stuff at the same time that kind of broke me open. And so I was CEO at Enzo at the time. We had an all hands meeting the Tuesday after the week that video came out, and I was trying to figure out what to say. We do these one word check-ins. I was trying to figure out what to say as we checked in, and I don't think anybody really knew what to say. And so the one word that I kind of pushed out was distracted. And then it took everything in me to say that, and my voice was all shaky. And so I started to go through what I was going through as kind of the only Black professional inside that firm at that time. And to my surprise, everybody was feeling the weight of that. I don't know that I expected all of my colleagues to be sort of weighed down by the moment. And so there were tears, and we all kind of went around, and we had this really rich conversation about race and racism and workplace bias that I had never, ever, ever expected, and really had never even let into work. I had never let those kinds of conversations into my professional life. And so I became inspired to kind of promote those conversations more. And so started to do that first at my firm, and then started to do that beyond, record some of those conversations. We brought in speaking therapists for Black professionals and professionals of other races who were sharing their experiences, listening therapists and coaches for people who were kind of listening and to help them empathize rather than sympathize, and help them kind of process what they were hearing. And there was just this really kind of rich and productive healing on both sides throughout those conversations. I recorded some in what I called the Just Listen Project, and it just became something that really moved me first, and a lot of people. And I sort of took a sabbatical to do this, and I knew after going through that experience and connecting with that impact that I wasn't going to be able to go back and just talk about kind of pure wealth. And so I started to talk about what that experience of engaging with my own impact was like. I talked to a few companies about this, and developed a framework around this healthy engagement with the impact that we want to have on the world. So thinking through things like grief and regret. Actually, I've taught from Power of Regret. I know you guys had Daniel Pink on. And so thinking through those things, teaching people how to productively hope, right? Kind of engaged in hope and stretch the resources that they have rather than chasing new resources. And then taking micro acts of courage in order to kind of affect that change. And so as I started to have those conversations, that framework just made sense to join with some form of impact through my professional life. I had really started to discover at that point and become a fan of some of what was going on in values alignment through direct indexing. So really got close with the guys at Ethic in particular, Jay Lipman and Johnny and Doug and Alex at Ethic, and talked to them about this idea of going to the private markets for a more tailored form of impact, and kind of doing something to align investment in the private markets with people's closely held values. And I had this idea about kind of how that could be done in a way that didn't blow up a portfolio with all venture or force people into affordable housing when that was the right asset class. And so just kind of designed that, met a partner who had been doing private capital impact investing since the term impact investing was coined. And we spent the better part of 2 years building what is now Uplifting Capital and kind of figuring out how to scalably personalize for people in the private markets.
Toussaint, you said something that the productively hoping, and I love that. I'm going to write that down after we're done with this. But back to the point about bringing in therapists, like listening therapists, and I'm intrigued by that decision and why you decided to do that and how that was impactful, because I feel that is so innovative, and that a lot of people want to have these very difficult conversations with nobody to help them understand what people are trying to say, and to receive it without judgment. And, talk to me a little bit, or talk to us a little bit about that decision and how impactful that was to facilitate the conversations.
Yeah. So when starting out those conversations, the first thing that we wanted to examine, or I wanted to examine, was what was getting in the way. Like why weren't people having these conversations? And really, like, there's this deep history on all sides of those conversations. On one side, though, the biggest barrier is shame. For that listener, and it was typically in 2020, it was a Black colleague sharing first a prior experience with racism, and ongoing. Actually, first we had them share about their humanity, like just who are you as a person, who are you as a human being, and then went into a past experience with racism, and then an ongoing bias or an ongoing burden in the workplace that relates to race. And so we had someone listening to that. But the amount of kind of shame, if you care for that person, because these were typically two colleagues who were friends, the amount of shame that one feels and feels compelled to kind of throw out this sympathy response, which is actually a disconnector rather than actually empathizing and showing compassion toward that person. It's just it's a very natural response. So the therapist was very much there to kind of keep that person in the listening mode and in the empathy mode. And then on the other side, there's trauma that blocks and fear that blocks the ability to share. And so helping people work through that trauma so that their stories could come forward. And what we found is, like, the healing went in both directions. Like, so each person had something to give to the other person. This person, the sharer not only got a set of ears to kind of share what this was, but it was really powerful to have those ears be a person of the race that was often on the other side of a lot of this trauma. And for that listener to have this learning and sharing about this lived experience just was, in every case, kind of transformative for people on both sides of that. And then at the end of the conversation, the listener would ask the sharer if they could further share those stories out. And so kind of giving sharer agency over those stories. And we found that, like, there was another ripple effect when maybe some people didn't have access to a friend or a colleague that could share this human experience, but they would get a third hand kind of experience with that colleague through someone who they knew. And like, really that kind of transformation through human experience just continued.
I love that you guys gave, agency and permission to share in that context too, right? Like, that's a really interesting, like, addition to it. The one of the other things that I picked out that, we do this sometimes. We don't do it on the show a lot, but I like this one, which is, I'll ask the two of you today, what's the one word that would describe you today? Since you said, I think you said distracted before, right?
Yeah.
Right there in that time period. So, but Anna, I'll go to you first. Give Toussaint a second there. put you more on the spot. Or you want me to go first? You want time?
You go first, Jamie.
I had time to. Yeah. So I said trying today, and not in trying in the sense like difficult, but like, feel like today the best I can do is I can try. Like, that's probably all I got today. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna do my best today, right? Like, I don't know, do my best. I feel like that's it. That's all I got to the table today. And I'll share a little bit. Anna knows this already. My aunt passed away last week. And I got a call when I was out at Riskalyze at 5 a.m. from my cousin and let me know. I think it was like Wednesday or Thursday morning, and it was sudden, like, heart attack type thing. Got up and passed away, and that was kind of like my second mom. And so I don't know, the last 4 or 5 days have been trying on the other sense of, like, trying to figure out how to grieve and things. in a different format. Like I'm out at a conference and then I had to go to another conference and then came home on Saturday. And so I went through like the first 3 days of loss, like in essence alone in hotel rooms at conferences and things like that. Now, look, I like saw some of my friends out there and went to dinner with people that I love, but it's still just a different experience, right? Like normally you're like, oh, be around friends and family. And it's like, no, stay at a conference and do panels and podcasts. And like, so I've been very open about this because I was like, I don't want people to be like, why is he like off in La La Land? And it's like, yeah, like I'm physically here. And usually it's not something I want to share with everybody. But anyways, fast forward, that's where I'm here today. And I feel like I'm trying my best today. And so that's what I'm giving you. Whatever I have today is my best. So that's step one. And yeah, so like now I open up, you're like, hey, here we go. Like, way to go, Jamie.
No, man. Like I appreciate you sharing that. And I can give my one word, but before like a lot of where I am today came from just trying to figure out how to process grief. And so the book that really sent me in this direction was a book by one of the authors of the 5 Stages of Grief, David Kessler. He wrote a book more recently about what he called the 6th stage of grief, finding meaning. And he's after he lost his adult son, he talked about how the former 5th stage or the former final stage of acceptance was just inadequate for him to kind of sit on. And he went through all these examples of different people who have done amazing work or have transformed lives of others or have found ways to transform their own lives out of a seed of grief. And he talks about how this kind of richness can be found. Out of grief.
I was gonna say that's and the finding meaning one. I haven't read this book now in like 20 years, but I tell people it's always one of the more impactful books on me, whether or not I'd like it anymore. But Man's Search for Meaning. I don't know if you've read that one, but
I
like
have.
that's a beautiful book. It's a Holocaust survivor, right? And then all of that and finding meaning through it and in the world. And it's just like that one's always stuck with me. But yeah, when I heard that one, like 6th stage of grief is this finding meaning. And I'm like, well, that ties very well to that one too. So, and Anna, if you haven't read that, I think I saw you shake your heads. I probably have one I can give to you next time I see you.
Okay.
Viktor Frankl. Yeah. Viktor Frankl is the author of that one.
Yeah.
So my word would be uplifting.
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 Fits in perfectly.
It's always my word. I have it ready, packaged. It's always ready to go. So for me, it's not only it's about how I want to show up in the world for other people, but it's also like the thing I like about uplifting is it has some ambiguity to it. It's both a verb in terms of what you do, like you could be uplifting, but it's also a feeling. Like the feeling, an uplifting feeling is something that I'm always aspiring to show up with and provide. And so like uplifting is not only what I hope to do with my hands, but also what I hope to be is pretty much my kind of go-to word.
That's beautiful. I love that. I guess I'm up. So my word would probably be hopeful. I think the last 2.5 years have been like so eye-opening for everybody to see things that in our communities we've seen for a long, long time. And I think I'm starting to notice that there are actually things being done, even though progress is very slow. And that, we're starting to be able to walk hand in hand with allies instead of, constantly fighting the systems. and granted, there is a ton of work that needs to be done. And it's like the progress is very minuscule, in my opinion. I'm starting to feel a little bit of hope, in just the work that I've been doing. And I'm headed to the Diversity Summit in a few days, and I'm really excited to get together with all of the FPA Latino folks who are going to be there and try to plan something really cool. And just, there's a lot of hope in the air. I don't know what the drivers of that hope is. And I hope that it's not, I don't know, what do they call it? A bull market phenomenon when people care about humanity. And I hope that, in this time when the market is down and things are not as great as they were before, that people still continue to care about, advancing humanity and equity and things like that. But we will see. Yes, I'm hopeful again.
Well, you said purposeful hope, though, right? So you even got the purpose part of it now, right? That's nice.
Well, I didn't say that. I stole that from you. I will attribute it though when I do use it.
Yeah, no. So I
For a while until she just makes it her own.
yeah. You can take it.
Yeah, they got a couple times.
I steal ideas.
The concept comes from in her book Grit, Angela Duckworth talks about these two different kinds of hope, like the kind of sitting back and hoping something changes versus the kind of like hope or that's like learned optimism, like hoping that the action that you're taking has an effect that you're hoping to create. And so it's really like just this more productive, more active form of hope.
I love, my mom always used to say, hope is not a process. Like she's very stern, you know, she still is, like she's real tiny and real mad all the time. But anyway, I love you, Mom. Don't get mad at that. But she's very like, she's very like, I can't say the word. I can't think of the word, but she's motivating in kind of a very serious militant type of way. And so like when I say, oh, how do you feel about this test? Oh, I hope it's going to be okay. I hope it's not a process. Did you study? Did you like, yes, Mom, I studied, I prepared, I'm ready to go. But like, that's always one thing that sticks in my mind. So it's kind of related. The hope is not a process, productive hope. That's a solution to that. So I'm going to tell her about productive hope.
All right. I like it.
Yeah. And don't worry, Mom, I'm not going to call you militant. So, you know.
She's proud of it. So that's not something that'll hurt her feelings. She's like, yes, I will tackle you at the knees. I am like a little drill sergeant. Like she loves that.
Like, you call me soft, I'm offended.
Exactly. Don't call me soft. Don't call me cute.
So it sounds like, Toussaint, you are a well-versed reader, being that you have dropped at least like 6 or 7 books here. We called out Jay from Ethic too. I saw a cool video of him today. You know, he's been on the show, I think, twice now. We've had Jay on, you know, so he's a great guy. I like him and Ethic, what they're doing there a lot. Have you read a book in the last, you know, I don't know, what book's on your mind right now? Like I was going to put a timetable around it, but I shouldn't do that. If you were going to run into somebody that's listening to this show and said, read one book, what book is it?
This is totally going to sound like it's a plug for your recent guest, but it's definitely Power of Regret. It is easily a Power of Regret. I just think so that whole kind of process or framework that I went through about kind of this healthy form of impacting and uplifting others in a way that uplifts us at the same time really does start with examining some of the heavier affects, or like these kind of what are thought of as heavier emotions, and none kind of more important as a springing off point than regret, like in looking at that before we start taking action. And so the Power of Regret was transformative for me. I got a chance to meet Daniel Pink at Excel, fortunately, and talk to him about it, which was really cool.
Well, you know he's smart because he spent the whole podcast calling me a jerk, and that Anna's so nice and wonderful.
Damon takes it out of context. It's not what happened.
I mean, look, there's an audio and video clip saying Jamie is a jerk from Daniel Pink, and that's just going to be like my cell phone ring. It's just Daniel Pink saying, you know, Jamie's a jerk and Anna's real nice.
That's not what happened, Toussaint. Don't believe him.
He's heard the episode. He sounds like he listened. It's a good episode.
She's like, you're also not saying it's untrue. You're like, oh no, that's not what
he said it, but
out of context.
He's taking it out of context. He didn't call Jamie a jerk.
In
he
the
was
right
like a what if situation. Right. Anyways,
everything is out of context if you're retelling it, right? There's no possible way to put something back fully into the context in which it existed previously, right? Like it's always out of context, you know.
So spoken like somebody with a law degree.
Yeah, Your Honor, look, we can't put all the context in here. There were lots of factors occurring that day. We couldn't even start enumerating the number of factors that influenced my client's decisions.
Yeah, that's a geek out. I can feel it. Before we do, I really want to squeeze this question in. But Toussaint, you talk about like as a leader, you believe you're obligated to help people find fulfillment. So talk to us a little bit about how you do that, why that's important to you, and how you do that for your people.
Yeah, so here's another framework. This was at Enzo. We talked about the waterfall in this waterfall of fulfillment. And so, like, first of all, the idea as the leader of a wealth management firm was that in order for us to drive fulfillment for our clients, I needed to drive fulfillment for the people inside of the firm. You couldn't do that for clients without filling up the well with inside of the firm. So the mission of Enzo was to translate wealth into fulfillment. My job was translating wealth management into fulfillment for the people inside of the firm. One of the ways we did that was we came to an agreement on what we showed up to work for. And we showed up to work for fulfillment, and we agreed that fulfillment was this waterfall of values that began with loving and trusting relationships. And so we talked about that being primary and the first thing. And then the second thing, and this is very Maslowian, right? So that was the first thing. And then the second thing, if you can get to loving and trusting relationships among yourselves and with yourself and with others, then there was this whole idea of self-actualization, which we talked about as self-awareness and self-mastery. Like that was our second level of fulfillment. And if you could do that for yourself, co-creation and collective impact was the next thing that we thought brought fulfillment. And if all those things went in order, then personal rewards were sort of the natural result of those things. And those were held with more gratitude and more generosity. And what we talked about was that there was a lot of people in our industry and a lot of people who we encountered who put number 4, number 1, and how it really doesn't drive fulfillment to start with this idea of personal gain and then start looking for relationships that are going to bring you that personal gain and start doing things and building yourself towards that. And so going in that sequence and in that priority, I think is not only something that brings fulfillment at work, but that's my philosophy on what brings fulfillment in life. So relationship, self, co-create, and then personal gain.
I love that. I'm going to tie, this might tie a little bit there, but when you then look out, and I mean, you talk about a lot of fulfillment, what's one thing that you expect to change maybe in your life or this profession, whoever one you want to take it, in the next 10 years? And what's one thing you don't think will change? So kind of what do you think is going to change and what's not going to change?
Yeah. So one thing that's going to change, and I think it's already, the change is already upon us, is that third level of fulfillment, that co-creation and collective impact piece. I think people are starting to recognize that that's like their own fulfillment is inextricably linked with the impact that they have on other people. I think that for a long time, that was seen as this legacy thing where people wanted to do something at the end of their lives, or they wanted to look back on their lives and see that they had left this form of legacy. I think that kind of in life impact and the ability to help others during their lifetimes is increasingly being recognized, not only as like an obligation or something that you should do, but as a source of goodness and richness for our lives. And so I think that trend will continue, and I think that will continue to change. What won't change? Gosh, that's a tough one. I think so. I'm bullish on people. So I think people are naturally good until we get confused and we stop talking to each other and we find our kind of corners of the world. So I think what won't change is I think human decency. I really do think a lot of our inability to have conversations and a lot of the issues that we're having with each other is context created. Like we're finding echo chambers, and we're finding unhealthy ways to sort of interact with ourselves and technology. I think there's an increasing recognition of those tools taking us in the wrong direction. And I don't think they have changed us as human beings. I don't think human beings are getting worse. And I think human decency will remain what it is. And I think it's incumbent upon us to kind of continue to tap that and find ways to unlock that.
So Toussaint, we like to also tie into more recently, Jamie has a book coming out. I don't know if you saw his tweets and LinkedIn posts, but
Finding Your Freedom. I seen it.
Yes. Okay, right on. So you're on the same page. So we're starting to ask people about, what does finding your freedom look like to you?
Yeah. I hate beating the same drum, but for me, it means really finding the way that I can help myself by helping others. And so but first of all, believing in that possibility, believing that I can do great for me financially, kind of energetically and spiritually. I can do well for myself by really, really, really adding value in whatever way that means, and impacting others in a positive way. To me, that's freedom. Like the opposite of that is kind of the scarcity of I need to take and deplete in order to add to myself. And to me, that sounds like jail.
Yeah. When you start describing it, it's like it's so the abundance mindset versus the scarcity mindset, right? And,
Absolutely.
so how close are you to that today? I love this one as a follow-up on a scale of 1 to 10. Where do you rank yourself today on having that freedom?
I mean, I pretty close to a 10. I quit a really, really, really good job in order to jump out and start something crazy because I believed in the intersection of those things, helping others and helping myself. I have found nothing but support and positive reception for what I'm doing. And so it's reaffirmed my belief that not only do I want this, but other people want this. And so I'm getting more and more confident in that belief, and more kind of entrenched in that freedom. So yeah, I feel it.
Give me a little bit of 2 to 3 minutes of Uplifting Capital, and you say, look, and I don't know, whatever that you probably have your own time frame on this, 1, 2, 3 years, we're talking to you again somewhere, and Uplifting Capital's just dominated in every way that you thought it would. What does that look like, right? When you're standing there, what does that look like?
So for me, first, I feel like we're headed there. We're not far away, fortunately. And it looks like advisors and their clients really, really have a means to easily plug into the private markets and impact and inclusion in the same way that they can plug into direct indexing now, or in the same way that they're starting to be able to plug into non-impactful private market solutions. And so like there was this concern for me that there's this tidal wave of new money going into the private markets, and particularly from retail-ish investors, really high net worth investors. And if we weren't intentional, then that wouldn't be as impactful and wouldn't be as inclusive as it could be. So there's all these really cool investments in this impact space and in this inclusion space. Why not make sure that tidal wave captures those investments? So if we are successful in 2 to 3 years, people are recognizing the same thing that I recognize for my freedom, which is impact alpha is available. So you can both impact people and you can have non-concessionary investments. We have, a platform that people are plugging into on a regular basis and feel like they can either go to with their advisors or they can go to themselves, and they feel deeply, deeply connected to what they are investing in, and feel like they're able to engage with that in a way that they haven't engaged with their investments before. I think if we do that, everything else about the company goes how it's supposed to go.
Well, this has been fantastic. And, I really appreciate you coming out to Excel, being part of that and that community and adding a lot to it. And then, for taking that risk. And I don't even know if it feels like a risk for you, but, as you said, leaving a really good place to go do something even better for yourself and the world is awesome. Where's the best place for people to connect and find you?
I've been trying to flirt with Twitter lately, but really on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's probably Toussaint Bailey, however you find me on LinkedIn, just look me up. Always available there. And then upliftingcapital.com is an easy way to find me.
Awesome. Well, Anna, thanks for being wonderful as always, and I will see you hopefully here pretty soon. And Toussaint, thanks for being on the show. And hopefully I'll see you at a conference or something coming up too, and continue on the amazing ride that you're going. And everybody else, thanks for joining and listening to this week's episode of the Framework Podcast.